This is the biggest thing with dating in general. Men tell women what they think they want to hear, not what's actually truthful to them. So, men, if you are listening to this, the best thing you can ever do for your dating life is to tell women exactly where you're at in your life, what you want, and why. And you will be shocked at how understanding they are about that.
Hi everyone, this is Polycurious and I am Fair, your host. And today I bring you the second part of my conversation with Natasha and Jeremy from All the Feels. So if you haven't listened to the first part, make sure to go back and listen to that one first. Natasha and Jeremy are sex coaches and educators. They have an amazing Instagram page where they share tons of resources. They also make educational porn and they do regular porn as well. And today they give amazing tips around communication. Jeremy talks about ways that are sexy and respectful to approach women, and they both tell us how to have a threesome that is fun and sexy and where everyone feels safe. We also talk about what one can do if you have a sexual desire or preference that your partner doesn't like. We talk about play parties, we talk about porn, we talk about sex ed, and honestly, so many interesting topics I am sure you will enjoy. Before we start, I just wanted to quickly remind you that we are doing an Instagram live this Sunday, May 7th. So if you have questions for Jeremy and Natasha or for me, you can go and follow me at Polycurious Podcast. Instagram is also the place where you can reach out to me if you're interested in my relationship coaching services or just if you want to say hi, which I always love to hear from listeners. Here's the second part of my conversation with Natasha and Jeremy from All the Feels. I'm interested in hearing about your perspective, Jeremy, because you mentioned like stepping away from toxic masculinity, but also being kind of like a pickup artist and having all these sexual skills. And I feel like a lot of guys struggle with that. You know, they're either sexual and want to put themselves out there, but they don't want to portray themselves as that dude that's like a player. And it's really hard to find a man who like knows how to do non-monogamy right. I feel like women are socialized to communicate more, and I don't know if you have any tips for men out there who might be like, okay, you know, either men who are like partner or men who are single but that have these desires and want to act on them and want to be with more than one woman, but you know they want to do it, or men, but like they want to do it in a way that's like ethical and without being like that guy.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things. One, I'm not a player because this is not a game. You know what I mean? So like the guys not wanting to be that guy. I'd also say like don't hit on women. Just talk to them. They're just people. You know what I mean? Have a conversation. Demonstrate. Like one of the reasons that I even started dating Natasha, she wasn't trying to have a relationship, and neither was I. But she had given her number out to a few different guys that night when we met.
Where did you guys meet?
In the
Montauk.
Hamptons.
Yeah, we were at a bar out in Montauk, and it was like 1 a.m.
Let's name it. We were at Surf Lodge. Shout out to Jama. Thanks, Jama. Yeah, and I had seen her when I walked in. I was like, oh my god, that girl's so fucking hot. Like, and she was talking. Her and her friends were talking to a bunch of dudes, and I was like, I don't care if that's her boyfriend. I'm gonna talk to that girl tonight. And it's like, if that was her boyfriend, I'm like, cool. It's nice to meet you. Have a good night. But like, I started talking to her, and you know, my whole thing was just I could tell that everyone else that was hitting on her was being a complete jackass, which it turns out is like even more true than I ever could have imagined. Like none of them had any fucking game, and they were
Basically,
just being
three men that night gave me the same chat up line, which is the chat up line I get in most places because I have a British accent. They all said, "You sound like you're from London," which is a line from Forgetting Sarah Marshall or a movie. And so basically everyone who had basically tried to hit on me had the same
cheesy pickup
line.
lines.
And then Jeremy's like, "Hey, how are you? Where are you from?" Like it was just immediately
Yeah.
a very authentic.
Yeah, how did you
Where are you
approach
from?
her?
How long? Yeah.
Did you
well,
just like?
she actually came up to me. I ordered this big punch bowl, that giant copper flamingo that you see up
Oh
there.
my God, you have a
And so-
memory from that night.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
But so I just hear behind me like, "Oh my God, what the fuck is that?" And I turn around. I was like, "Oh, it's that girl. Don't fuck this up." And so she actually tried to pawn me off onto her friend.
Like,
And
no
then-
offense to Jeremy, but like I did just see a shiny gold thing. And I was like, "What is that?" Like, I love
Yeah.
sparkles. I'm like a magpie. And then he looks up at this handsome man. I was like, "Oh, can I get you a drink?"
And she's like, "No, but my friend would like one." I was like, "Cool, okay, like here's your drink." And then I turned back to her and I was like, "So what's your story? Like, where are you from? You know, who are you? What are you doing? How long have you been in New York? Whatever." And just made a point to demonstrate genuine interest in her. And this isn't just about how can men pick up women or whatever. This is the actual thing about attraction in general, or getting someone to like you. The best way to do it is by demonstrating interest in them. I asked her genuine questions and demonstrated that I was actually interested in getting to know her as a person, which is like, no pickup lines, not hitting on her. She kept trying to be like, "Oh, you should talk to my friend. She's single." I was like, "No, I want to know about you."
Yeah.
And just maintained a lot of eye contact and just very genuine and open. And in the end, like, we met up the next day, same thing, like genuine connection, like talked about real shit. And it was like, okay, I actually like this girl. And then a couple days later, when we were back in the city, we went on a date, and that was that. And like, it all snowballed very quickly from there.
That's great. I love what you're saying about taking genuine interest in women as people, because I find that a lot of guys have this like dichotomy in their head, like, okay, it's either someone I fuck or someone that I want for a relationship. And then I've had experiences dating monogamous guys, monogamish, I guess, but like guys who come from this mentality that, because I'm partnered, the moment they find someone else that might become their primary, they're like, okay, well, she was the person who I fucked, so then I'm not going to like care for her as a person anymore, and it's not like they've been mean or anything, but just like in the little things that you realize, like, oh, okay, like
drop off.
Yeah, they just
friends
like
with benefits, like, oh, we're not actually friends, or you're just
exactly it was
hooked up.
just the benefits,
Yeah.
and like luckily I've also had experiences with like, it's just transitioned into a friendship,
Yeah,
and those
which-
people actually did care about me.
Yeah, which are the best.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
but like it's hard for men to understand. I feel I don't feel like they mean to be like, I don't even feel like they didn't care for me. They just like literally do not know how to handle that situation and how to be like, hey, listen, it's been lovely to be with you, but I need to focus on this other relationship, but let's be friends. Or maybe not let's be friends, but then like they still are
But just
they
leave it in a
still-
good place.
yeah, they still treat
Yeah.
me like the same way, because it's just like
Yeah.
a switch, like they
Yeah.
just stop treating me the same way.
I think it's
you
a
know?
little bit worse than that. I think it's somewhere in between, like where you wish it was and like where you're seeing it. And I think it's because it's not just that like guys don't know how to handle it and like let people down gently of like, hey, I'm kind of in a monogamous situation, like, so like you're probably going to hear from me less or whatever, but like it's been great. Like, I think there's a further layer of that, of like men are not in touch with their emotions, and they also assume, and this is the biggest thing with dating in general, men tell women what they think they want to hear, not what's actually truthful to them. So men, if you are listening to this, the best thing you can ever do for your dating life is to tell women exactly where you're at in your life, what you want and why. And you will be shocked at how understanding they are about that. And they all assume like, and that's why like men lie to women, and they're, they think, oh, like we're in a monogamous relationship and he's actually sleeping with a bunch of people. If you would tell women that you're dating, like, I don't intend to have anything serious right now, I will be dating other people. Some people aren't going to be into that, but most women actually would be, as long as they're in the same place in their life.
It
And,
really is like so hard when a guy is like, this is where where I stand, this is what I want, even if it's like rejection, like if they're like, listen, like this is how I feel about you, like I just appreciate it so much. And I mean, I think that's something that everyone should do, like have that conversation. Like a lot of people have this question of like, oh, should I tell others, if I'm like seeing other people or not. And I don't think that necessarily you have to, but I think that why not? Like, why not being like, I mean, maybe not the first few dates, but like if you have a like an ongoing relationship with this person, like having a check-in, just being like, hey, this is where I stand. You know,
Yeah.
this
Or
is,
what do you want out of this?
yeah, what are you want out of this? Like, you know, I want to make sure that you know that like I'm not looking for a monogamous relationship right now, or I am, but I don't see us in that way, but I would love to continue this as like friends with benefits. Is that how you see us? Like, I think that just saves so much like
Yeah.
heartbreak.
But it also requires a lot of vulnerability in terms of communicating where you're at and what you want. And I think, you know, we are taught to not be vulnerable. We're taught to be brave and tough and strong. And so I think it's really hard one. If you haven't, maybe as a guy, if you haven't done that internal kind of reflection of what you actually want, but also there's this layer of, you know, not being vulnerable because then you might get hurt or rejected. So I think it takes, you know, a lot of vulnerability to communicate where you're at openly, and also, you know, not waste someone else's time by not hurting their feelings and just saying what.
Yeah, these are not easy conversations to
No, and even
have.
then,
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
vulnerability takes not just bravery, but also a level of self-awareness that I struggle back and forth on whether or not some people are capable of having that level of self-awareness or even that level of empathy. Because going back to what you said originally, you know, a lot of guys approach dating as fuckboys, and frankly, they view women as a vessel through which they can have sex.
Yeah.
And so it's a goal-oriented thing of how do I have sex? And it's not about treating someone as a person and understanding that they have feelings and and it's just like, what do I have to do or say to fuck tonight? And not
Yeah.
like actually having any empathy towards the other person of like, how is this going to affect them, whatever. And it's like, if you play the long game and you take it slow and you are honest instead of telling people what you think they want to hear, you'll do a hell of a lot better. You're not burning bridges. You're not creating drama in your own life or in theirs. But I do wonder if some people like lack that empathy. And there's a lot of studies that there are more sociopaths walking around us than people realize.
Yeah, and this is also why non-monogamy is not for everyone, because there's people that either don't have that self-awareness or don't want to have those conversations. And if you are, you know, in an ideal world, you know, everyone would be able to, but if you're not able to, like, then, you know, you might be better off in a monogamous relationship where you don't have to be vulnerable and be self-aware and have all of I mean, you also have to do that, but it's a little different. It's a little maybe easier to, you know, be vulnerable with your one primary partner than with someone that you might just be dating, you know.
Well, and we talk about that a lot. Like, 95% of people fantasize about threesomes or groups. So like almost everyone is into this, but most people can't handle it. So like there's also room for like, it's okay if some things are just fantasies. Maybe that doesn't work for you personally. Maybe you struggle with jealousy or possessiveness or abandonment issues too much to actually make it a reality. Maybe it just doesn't work for your relationship dynamic, and that's just not a smart thing. And maybe it's better to just like role play it or just fantasize about it when you masturbate, or, you know, maybe work it into dirty talk with your partner, but not actually do it. And like, that's totally okay too. Um,
Yeah, or maybe like dating separate works better for you because you don't actually have to see it, you know,
yeah.
and
And
maybe
I
that's
know
a
people that
trigger
works
for
for.
you, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has different triggers and boundaries that they need to establish based on like what they're comfortable with. But I think going back to why, you know, it's a hard non-monogamy can be a scary thing to explore, because I think, like we were saying, it takes a lot of like self-growth and self-reflection, and you know, non-monogamy will bring out your biggest insecurities. So it's like, are you willing to put in the work to understand how you can be a better person in yourself in terms of more confidence and get less insecure and jealous, but also how can I, you know, put my partner's needs first too, and kind of get over myself so that I can make sure that my partner's happy. So I think it's hard to navigate non-monogamy, but it's also like essential that you, I guess, yeah, reflect a lot on your own, reflect a lot on what your partner's needs are, and really build yourself up to the point where you're not letting your insecurity stopping you from explore that, or having double standards about, you know, we hear a lot of people saying, okay, I'll have a threesome, a lot of men might say, I'll have a threesome, but only with another girl. Like I wouldn't have it with another guy. And so it's like, okay, so you're going into this idea of non-monogamy based on what is not going to trigger your insecurities, but that isn't necessarily best for your partner because your partner
purely selfish.
It's selfish, whereas your partner might want to try being with you and another guy. So it's doing it for the right reasons, and also there's going to be compromise because your partner's going to want to have different needs to you, and it really takes looking at your insecurities so that you're getting over those and not holding your partner back because of what you're most insecure about. So it's a lot of self-reflection and self-growth that comes with it.
Yeah, and do you have any tips, as someone who had this desire to show other women how to get over their insecurities, connect more with their bodies? Like, what are some maybe quick tips or,
Yeah. So every time I would start to get insecure or jealous, I would plan a date night with myself. And so if Jeremy was out of the house, I would, or even when I lived, alone beforehand, I would put on some really nice lingerie, light some candles, play some music, and I would just have a night of just dancing by myself in my own body. And I always felt so much like full of love for myself after those evenings. I was like, wow, if I'm getting insecure, that's just a sign that I'm not feeling good enough in myself. So dancing home alone in like nice lingerie or a cute outfit and lighting candles or whatever it might be was just time that I would allocate to myself, and I'd always fill myself up in that way. Another thing that I've practiced a lot is like mirror work. So looking at my reflection in the mirror and complimenting myself. Because then it's just with the dancing or the mirror work, it's just you and yourself, really, right? You and your body, you and your reflection. And I find that the best way to kind of pour some love into yourself that's to do with your own relationship versus just who you are in the relationship, right? As in, okay, I'm focusing on me, Natasha, and how good I feel. I'm not thinking about that through the lens of like my relationship and what's Jeremy up to, and that's my boyfriend. I'm like, okay, whatever Jeremy's doing, Natasha needs some like Natasha time right now. So I think dancing is just so like therapeutic in general, right? We store a lot of stress and emotion in our bodies. So I think for me, dancing has been the most powerful way in which I've like dropped into my body, felt good, shaken off any stress or insecurity, and just like had fun with myself, So yeah, dancing around your home alone is a good way to feel good about yourself, I think.
Also therapy.
Therapy. Oh my gosh. I mean, yeah, sorry. That I feel like that's like an obvious, but yes, therapy in terms of working through your biggest like insecurities and where they come from. Like I've also read like a ton of like self-help books and female empowerment books.
Any ones you recommend besides the Existential?
Yeah, Existential Kink, Untamed by Glennon Doyle. That was a really big one for me. Also, Pussy, a Reclamation by Mama Regena. That was really the book that helped me, get inspired to explore my sensuality and my body. And also Brene Brown, which is Daring Greatly, talking a lot about how much bravery it takes to be vulnerable. So I think a combination of those books in particular, I started to develop practices that I know would fill myself up with love, and also time to meditate and just be on my own a lot more so that I'm not feeling threatened by, again, how I am in the relationship, just what are my own needs right now, independent from my partner.
Yeah, I love that. We'll definitely include all those books in the show notes. But yeah, I love that, like, you're coming from a place of, okay, I have this history, I was abused, I have these insecurities, insecure attachment, is that the word you use?
Yeah.
And like people might think like you can't do non-monogamy if you experience those things, but you actually can. And not only you are doing it successfully, but you are also helping other people from a place of like knowing what that actually feels like, what because I mean, sexual abuse is like so common and so prevalent. And so yeah, I think that what you guys are doing is awesome. I know that you guys are sex coaches, right? So do you see people like privately or like only through
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear about that because I'm actually now training to become a relationship coach. So I'm curious, like, what what did you guys do to like train, and what are some of like the main concerns or issues that your clients come with?
Sure. Well, as far as our training, we took an online course through Dr. Ava Cadell. that gives you credit towards an AA sect certification. And other than that, obviously, all of the different books that we've read,
I
and
mean,
our
also
own studies, and
experience.
Yeah.
Experience, I feel like it's the biggest thing.
Mhm,
Yeah.
yeah.
mhm.
And but as far as like how it worked, I mean, when we launched the company, we just put it out there, and we were very lucky to get very enthusiastic, positive reinforcement from people saying like, this is so amazing, so glad you guys are doing this. We had people write in pretty quickly saying that like the things that we were writing and posting like really helped them personally. A couple people felt strong enough to come out as being bi. A lot of people felt that we were helping them deal with a lot of like shame and guilt and different things like that. And then when we started taking on private clients, we have one client who we helped to start navigating non-monogamy, and that was really big. How do you have these conversations with the women that you're dating, and how do you navigate having a threesome that will be good for you and your partner, and not something that will start a fight? And then how do you then go out and do this, um, you know, just as a relationship style from here on out in your dating as a single person?
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you have a threesome that won't cause you to have a fight?
Talk about everything, over communicate, talk about every possibility ahead of time, check in with your partner throughout, and make sure that they're good. Make a point, like you were saying. I mean, I know you phrased it as like, everyone can take turns on the other person. We tend to do it more just to make sure everyone is involved at the same time, unless someone obviously like wants to take a break and just I'm good for now. I'm a little exhausted. I just want to watch for a bit, whatever. But we just try to keep everyone involved at the same time so that no one feels left out. And yeah, just being in touch with your partner and like how they're feeling, and making sure that you're not making them uncomfortable. And part of that too is not just like over communicating ahead of time or debriefing after. It's working consent into what you're doing, like, oh, I really want to do this with you now, or like, how would you feel about doing this, especially in a threesome, because it's like, okay, like, what do you want to do next? Oh, like, she really likes it when like I fuck the other girl from behind while she gets her pussy eaten. Like, would you like me to fuck you from behind while you eat her pussy? You know what I mean? Like, you have to be very explicit about what it is that you're asking for.
Which also is a great way to ensure that you're establishing like consent from the other partner at all times. Like, we would like this position. Like, are you okay with that?
Yeah, like, would you like that too, or do you want to try this, or what would you like? And there's also a misconception out there that like, um, asking for consent or talking about sex kills the mood, which is like the dumbest thing. And if you think that asking for consent is killing the mood and that it's awkward, sorry, but you're the awkward one. Like, you're the one that's making it weird. It's so easy to work consent into dirty talk, but like, oh, like, how do you want me to fuck you now? Or like, oh, I really want to suck your dick right now, or I really want to fucking eat your pussy from behind, and wait for their answer. And it's like, it doesn't have to be like, would you like me to have intercourse with you? Check yes or no. You know what I mean? Like, but especially in a threesome, because there's like two different people involved, and like maybe someone's not entirely bi, and like she's more into being with me and then maybe just kissing Natasha or whatever it is. You have to ask about, are you okay with this? Are you okay with that? Like, would you want me to do this? Do you want her to do this with you? Like, so communicating before, communicating during, and communicating afterwards.
Yeah, the debrief afterwards, I think, is especially important for saying, "Hey, I didn't love it when you did that, or you spent a lot of time in that position, and I was really sitting there. So next time, maybe that's not a great position for us to try." So I think the debrief is like really, really important for basically, being vulnerable and saying, "Hey, this upset me. Like, next time, can we, one, do you want to do it again? And next time, can we reconfigure this so we're more aware of what makes me sensitive?" So like,
and there's another thing that we haven't mentioned, which is also one of the biggest things that people overlook in going into it, is they have their fantasy as a couple of what they would like threesome to be like. You're dealing with another person, and that other person has their own wants and needs and desires. And so whatever your fantasy is about a threesome, it's not going to work out that way exactly, because you have to compromise for that other person to make sure that like they're cool with everything that's going on, and their needs get met, and that their fantasies or desires play out as well. So um, you also have to accommodate and expect that other person to have their own like expectations or wants or whatever, and compromise with both your partner and the other person, make sure that like everyone's happy and enjoying it, and whatever feels fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's true that there's ways to work consent into like dirty talk. And I totally agree with that. But I also like to remind people it might also be awkward. Not everyone's like great at that. Even if they say like, do you like that or whatever? And then you're like, no, I don't like that.
Yeah,
Like that
Yeah.
can be
yeah,
awkward.
and that's why it's so important. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's why it's so important. But I think that people need to also get comfortable with being like, no, I don't like that, especially in threesome situations, because it's like double pleasure, because you're not pleasure, also double pleasure, but I meant to say pressure. Because it's not only like pleasing your partner, it's pleasing like the other person, and if they both want to do something that you don't want to do, like
you
saying
feel the
no
weight of
can
the
be,
expectation.
yeah, it can be really hard. So I think, just like we were saying, having conversations about desires, like when you're dating, is vulnerable and it's difficult. Also, saying no is vulnerable and it's difficult, and it might be a tiny little bit awkward, but then it's going to be great, because you said if you say no to the things that you don't want, then you're making space for the things that you want. So like then you'll have a great experience, and then that like little awkward moment will not even be remembered,
And on the other side, you asking, even just you asking, even if it is a no, you're establishing trust with that person. So then they're going to be more relaxed moving forward, and everyone's going to have a better time. And then also, again, like about not burning bridges. It's not like, oh, I had a threesome with this couple and they weren't really concerned about me. He never asked and whatever. So like, I'm not going to do that. Versus like, wow, that person was really attentive and like cared about how I felt and like gave me the space to speak up and say no, because especially a lot of women don't feel saying no is confrontational to them, so they don't feel strong enough to speak up. So like giving them that space, waiting for the answer, pausing before you do something and say, hey, like I would really like to do this, and allowing them to answer. And if they say no, I'm not really feeling that right now. And then the other thing is, with anything involving sex, respect the no. Respect a no
Yeah.
the first time, and don't push people. The more you can make them feel comfortable. I mean, maybe they're just not comfortable doing that the first time, and maybe they'll let you, maybe they'll be into that later once you establish trust, or maybe that's just a hard no for them, but there are other things that they would be into, and like in general, everything else you've already been doing up to that point is cool, and like, they'll still be comfortable with you even if they're not into that one act.
Yeah. And also like the awkwardness of saying no, again, it's like a muscle that you have to flex and get, more used to saying no if you're not used to it, but also the awkwardness in the situation that can be like, oh, okay, let's do something else. Like sex can be awkward and messy, right? Like bodily fluids get everywhere or whatever it might be. Like it's, where you might fart or
Yeah,
queef
or
yeah, like
two bodies slapping up against each
Yeah,
other, making
them
weird, sweaty, slappy sounds.
like seals, like or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
But like sex is messy and awkward, and I think that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to normalize is like, yeah, sex can be awkward, but that's real, right? Like the sex you see in porn or in mainstream movies doesn't show the messiness and getting into certain positions that can be awkward and clumsy. I think it's just getting used to the awkwardness of it all and not feeling embarrassed by it just because we don't see those real awkward experiences in mainstream media. So I think getting used to the fact that sex can be awkward, but it's nothing to be ashamed about. So like, let's laugh about it. I just farted. Let's laugh about it rather than me going into like fear that I've ruined the like perfect experience. Let's just normalize it and realize these are human bodies. Like bodies do things sometimes that like are out of your control. So like being okay with the messiness of all of that and the awkwardness.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that you love like at play parties, like just seeing like everyone kind of like having sex and having a good time and maybe not having sex. But like one of the things that I enjoy the most about play parties sometimes is like not even that. I mean, that's great, but also just being like seeing how silly it is. Like there would be like, people having sex and then you're like eating a sandwich and
Yeah.
like, like whatever, like
We've
someone's like getting a phone call.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, it's just
we've
like
had
it's
that.
like messiness around that. It's just like, oh, this is funny, like we're in this situation and it's not like what you see in porn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's real.
Yeah.
And like casual. Like we've had
Yeah.
that exact scenario where like two people started at it before anyone else did, and they're full on like hard fucking like spanking each other and whatever else, and the rest of us are still fully dressed and like sipping cocktails and eating cheese and like
Just watching.
yeah, for like a half hour until someone else started making out, and then the rest of us got into the sex party. It was just like two people met, were immediately attracted to each other, immediately started fucking, and the rest of us are like, "So, where are you from?" It's like, you know what I mean? It's
It
like,
is funny.
yeah.
Yeah. But it's also cool that it just normal, like it's also, that's why I love sex parties, because it's such a open, non-judgmental space. Like you can be fucking, or you can just be observing, or you can be eating. Like I just love that it's just everyone can do their own thing, and it's a non-judgmental space for whatever type of experience you want to have. You can go to a sex party without having sex, you can just watch, or
Yeah,
it's
we've
just
definitely had friends come and do that.
Yeah.
They just want to watch or like maybe make out, but they're not comfortable with being touched right now or whatever it is. And like,
Mhm.
it's also important to have like a non pressure environment, and make sure everyone feels comfortable, and then like boundaries are to be respected, and you only have to do whatever you're comfortable doing, and lay down the ground rules of like, you know, consent is to be respected without question, and boundaries are to be respected without question. And if anyone doesn't, like, you got to leave. That's it. Like, no second chances, no nothing. No, these are the rules going in. Like, we vet people very hard to make sure they understand what those things mean and how they work. We stop problems before they happen. You know what I mean? I don't let anyone into this space with people who I like or care about, and where there is the potential for someone to be assaulted and for trauma to happen. We stop those problems before they happen, and don't let anyone in who doesn't already understand those things up front and how they work, and like knows to respect them.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes people are like, "Oh, so what are like play parties like?" And I'm like, "Which play party?" Right? Like it's like any party, right? So, yeah, finding like a party that you feel like you have some trust with the people, that they do a consent talk, all of that is important. So, I know this podcast is about non-monogamy, but since you guys are sex coaches and I'm sure that this question has come up for you, what do you do when like you might want something that your partner doesn't want, but then they are not open to non-monogamy, or even you are not open to non-monogamy, like you want to remain monogamous but you have like a certain desire, whether it's like rough sex or being pegged, I don't know, whatever it is, and like maybe the other person doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, there's one website in particular that we like recommend everyone looking at, which is sectionaire.com. And this website is really helpful because, if you're partnered, it gives you each a questionnaire and you answer all the different kind of like kinks or fetishes or even like sex positions that you're into. And so, you and your partner answer those separately, and then you kind of submit it, and this will match you up with all your common interests.
It only shows you the thing that you're both
that you
into.
both said you're into. So it's a really good
Oh,
way
okay,
to
cool.
essentially say, hey, oh, this is cool. We're both into these things.
And
like
to fast track the conversation
to
without
fast-
having to go, are you
exactly.
into this? And maybe they're embarrassed about
Yeah,
asking
yeah.
about that one thing.
So that's a great starting place to get aligned on what you're both interested in terms of like, that can be a conversation starter. What are we both interested in that we'd like to explore? But then that can also open to the conversation. Well, I'm into these things that aren't on this list, or I'm into this. And it just helps have this generalized conversation about, maybe we start focusing on the things that we're both interested in, but are there other compromises of things that I'm not necessarily into that, we can try, for example.
Yeah, because sometimes it's like, okay, I'm not into this, but I'm not offended by it, so I'll do this for you, and it doesn't harm me. I'm just not getting anything sexual from this, but you are, and like I want you to be happy, and that's cool. So there's that compromise. but then there's another layer, which is what you're getting at, where it's like, no, that's a hard no for me, and you're into that. So, if that's a it's a non-monogamy situation. If that's a monogamous situation, and there's no room for, okay, you need to get that from someone else, then there needs to be a hard discussion about how important is that to you in a relationship, and is it okay for you to just leave that as fantasy or masturbatory, or are we sexually incompatible and you're not going to be happy unless you have this thing? And I that's a hard line and a hard no for me, and I'm not going to be able to provide that for you. So now we have to have a discussion about, would you want to stay in this relationship and not have that thing with me or from me, or should you go find someone that you can have that with? And honestly, that's okay. And I think sexual incompatibility is really important for people to talk about, and it's not something that gets talked about enough, whether that's like a wild difference in desired frequency. If someone's a once a month person, another person is a twice a day person, there's no amount of compromise where they're ever both going to be happy. Someone's going to feel pressured to have sex too much, and the other person is going to feel that they're getting rejected way too frequently. And or if it's like a kink that someone's really into and whatever, but it's like people have this idea that you can't break up with someone over sex because that's quote unquote like a superficial reason or whatever. And like, that's absolutely not true. Like, why are you even attracted to that gender in the first place? Do you know what I mean? Whether you're straight or gay or whatever it is, like sex is an integral part of a relationship, and a big part of your attraction to that partner, and anything more than a friend sense.
And also a
So,
big part of your own emotional and physical well-being,
oh yeah,
right? So
yeah, and sense of happiness and identity and relationship satisfaction. So the idea that like you can't break up with someone over like a sex thing, whether it's a kink or any sort of incompatibility, is absolutely untrue. And it's okay to say like, hey, look, we're a great couple in a lot of different senses, but like we don't match up that way, and like you're never going to be happy without getting that thing. So maybe we need to break up if non-monogamy is not on the table.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay. It's not superficial.
And it's not something to
not,
feel shameful about.
no, it's a perfectly valid reason to break up. You're not
Yeah.
compatible
Yeah.
in this one way.
Yeah, for sure. But I love the idea of like kind of maybe it's instead of focusing on the thing you're not getting that your partner doesn't want to give you, maybe focus on the things that you both have in common. So maybe by just like shifting your attention, then you might realize that the thing that you thought that you really needed to be sexually fulfilled, maybe you actually do not need it. And then if after doing that, if after just focusing on the things that you both want to do that maybe are like new and exciting, you still feel like you need it, then maybe you can open up the non-monogamous conversation. Then if that doesn't work out, then you can think of breaking up, or just it's also valid to say, okay, I'm gonna give up this fantasy, I'm gonna repress this desire. I mean, we all have to do compromises because I love this person so much in so many other ways.
Sure. And what you said is really interesting too, because aside from just like, oh, we can try these other things, one of the best exercises we ever had in both a good and a bad sense is the discussion of why. So we've done it as far as like that whole debrief about, what are your triggers or what things could bother you about non-monogamy. The why is really important because that can lead you to other things that might trigger you. It's the same thing with kinks. And I talk about this a lot. The why is super important because I really want to try this. Well, why? What about that turns you on? Because that can guide you towards other things that you would be turned on by, other kinks and other fantasies that, are similar as far as why that appeals to you, but a different act that maybe your partner's into. You're still scratching that same itch.
Yeah,
that
can
thing
you give an
do.
example? I know what you're talking about, but I feel like an example would be helpful.
Sure. So think about it like bondage, right? So it's about giving up control to the other person. Like it could be the physical feeling of being tied down, but it might be about giving up control to the other person. There are ways that you can have a dom sub relationship with somebody and submit to them without having to be physically tied up. And it can be just you agree to whatever role play you're doing and you follow their commands, and you are at their will. as opposed to them having to restrain you, and then they can do whatever they want to you within, your agreement of whatever you're into. And obviously use a safe word, everybody. But it's about giving up control. It's not about being physically tied down. You know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily have to be
why do you
about-
want that kink? Because I want to give up control.
Yeah,
Okay, let's
yeah.
like
What
look
are
at other things that might get you that, because I hate bondage or
Mhm.
whatever it is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't like being physically restrained, but I want you to be in charge of what we do. Yeah. So you're getting that same feeling and fulfilling that same desire without it being like, hey, I'm not comfortable tying you up,
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's do it through role play.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. So many topics we could continue talking about, but before we kind of wrap up, I wanted to like quickly touch on porn, because I know that you guys have educational porn videos out there
And regular porn.
and
We do
regular
both.
porn. You do both. Okay, amazing. So for people out there who might be interested, but I mean, since you do both, it's actually like great, because so I don't know, like I feel like porn can be really great, but there's also a lot of sexist porn out there and violent porn out there, and I've heard like guys being like, "Oh, like porn has like kind of like ruined my sexual experience." I mean, I'm sure women experience it as well, but because most porn is from a male heterosexual perspective, obviously we don't want people to feel like they need to live up to like what they watch on porn, but also there's nothing wrong about watching porn, and it can be very fulfilling, right? So
Yeah, I mean, porn, it can be so helpful for understanding what your own kinks are and what your own fetishes are and what positions you like, but also watching porn with a partner, you see what turns them on and what they're interested in. So porn can be really helpful for you navigating what your own desires are. But then on the flip side, it can be not helpful when, for example, there's like no foreplay done, and all you see is the woman like moaning really exaggerated, like she's always having a good time, or the fact that maybe basically the dick goes into the arse with no lube and no foreplay and no build up. Like it's really kind of damaging, because that's not showing, again, like the messiness or the awkwardness of, oh, let's get the lube out, we need a lot of lube before we try anal, right? Or it doesn't show anyone like farting or any of that stuff.
You keep going back to farting.
Sorry, I clearly fart a lot during sex.
I don't think you ever have.
Well, queefing.
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah.
Queefing, the front type of
I was
fart.
like, did I miss it? Have you been sneaking these out? Well, no.
I was gonna say, do you fart in your porn videos to show people the messiness of sex?
So we are very, in our educational porn in particular, we are very much, showing how much lube you actually can need with anal. Like we'll say, we're going to put on lube now and then keep reapplying lube. Like we're very, very open and communicative about the things that I think porn would normally leave out, which is like the messiness of having awkwardness of having to stop and get more lube.
Yeah, and that's very specific to anal, but so there are a few different misconceptions about porn. Like one, a lot of it shows scenarios that are definitely sexual assault. They don't show consent or ongoing escalating consent of asking about each new position or act that you want to do. It's a visual medium to appeal, like you said, to mainly, a male audience. And so they show what looks hot. They're not showing what feels good and how to pleasure a woman. So the positions are what looks hot to a guy, not what feels good to girls. So a lot of guys are trying to do what is essentially, the highest level of professional athlete at fucking, but they're doing it for the audience at home, not for their partner. So like, it's not showing a realistic depiction of like what positions and moves feel good. It's not showing how to get consent at all, let alone in a way that's like sexy and not awkward, but at the very least just at all. And then it reinforces scenarios that are definitely sexual assault in a lot of the different like porn scenarios. And porn is, I believe, 90% of people's first introduction to sex. So mainstream porn teaches a lot of bad lessons that you have to then unlearn later in life. And some people don't ever bother to take the time to unlearn them, or no one ever says something to you like, yo, what the hell are you thinking trying to like fuck me in the ass with no lube and without asking? Like, that was just sexual assault. And also that is going to hurt me. Like, you could do it in a way where it would feel good.
Yeah, the performance thing is big, right? Like oh, I have to have this stamina. And like often that's not even like what women want. Like not every woman wants to be like, fucked in that way. That's like very like, oh, I'm macho and like very fast and aggressive. Like, yeah, the foreplay, like, I don't know. I hate it like when in porn, like, when they like cut from like a kiss to like all of a sudden like a blowjob, and you're like, wait, but like the best part, they cut it out, so yeah, it's awesome that you guys sounds like are trying to put out a different image of like what sex can be, and also something that I've heard you say in other interviews is like everyone's different. So it's not only like teaching like the actual skills, but teaching the how does this feel, and like really focusing on like how things feel more than like how things look, as you said.
Which is especially hard with women because, I mean, the clit is on the outside, which is the most important part as far as women and pleasure. But the G spot, the A spot, the P spot are all internal. And so that's very hard for people to see. And, the internal shape and size of a woman's vagina is the same as the shape and size of every guy's penis. They're all different. And so it is about like exploring and asking your partner, how does this feel and what do you like? Because everyone's different and you can't necessarily see that from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, especially women are so complex. I've always been like a sexual person, but it took me like a while to figure out how to like make myself come, because
Really?
I just like, was never taught. Like, I mean, first of all, I didn't watch porn, and then even if you watch it, there's no like, this is how you touch a woman. It's always like focus on like the pleasure of the man. And yeah, I just think it's like so important to read books, and like there's even stuff that I'm still learning that I'm like, I went to I went to a squirting workshop at Burning Man, and that's where I learned like, because there was, I had this confusion with squirting and like regular orgasms, because like, I was like, okay, so when I squirt, I guess I'm having an orgasm, but I wasn't like really sure, because of course it feels very different than the clitoral one. And then I learned like, actually, like it's two separate things. Like you can squirt and have an orgasm, or you can just squirt. And even that, like, I didn't know. And this was September, like 3 months ago, like, so there's so much that we don't talk about, especially when it comes to women's sexuality.
Yeah, because there's no pleasure-based sex ed. Even if you're lucky enough to get sex ed as a kid, as a teenager, or whatever, it's about reproduction and diseases. It's not about, they never mention the G-spot. Without having that pleasure-based sex ed, we're just left with a huge deficit to try to overcome as adults through your own exploration, and sort of like a fumbling, awkward meander towards trying to get this knowledge and these skills and understand like how to please a partner and how to go about having these conversations.
Yeah. And also don't like pleasing your own body, let alone a partner's body, right? We're not taught about our own pleasure network and how the different ways we can enjoy our bodies, let alone potentially the opposite sex and what feels good for them. So yeah, without pleasure-based sex, then it's just no wonder we all feel confusion and awkwardness. And also why, I think like squirting has become a big area of confusion, right? Like no one ever we've only just really recently started to address what squirting actually is, right? Like clitoris was only added to the dictionary, like,
it was only codified by science in the late 90s.
90s. Yeah, the 90s. It's so recent.
Yeah, it's really been overlooked, the whole like spectrum of female sexuality. And it's sad that so many women, especially of like younger generations, like never even like knew that, they could actually be sexually satisfied, or like how to pleasure themselves, or like, I'm grateful. One of the good things about the internet is that now there's so much more information out there. But But yeah, I'm so glad that there's people like you, like kind of changing the narrative and like kind of making also like porn and just the information that's out there not so like centered in like a patriarchal like heterosexual like perspective, you know, because I think it's very important to like empower women in that way.
Yeah, and to show real pleasure and real sex.
Yeah, yeah,
And explain to people how to have it themselves.
yeah, and to focus on the feeling, I think that's really important, and I think that's something that even like I try to like remind myself. It's like kind of meditation, right? Like coming back to the breath. Like it's the same in sex. If like sometimes you are like, I don't know, not really present, you have to like go back and like focus on like how you're feeling as opposed to like what society tells you that you should be doing or what you watch from porn or
how you look, and
or how you look.
in that position, or how does your body, being self-conscious instead of just focusing on enjoying the moment and pleasuring your partner.
Yeah, and I think especially for women, enjoying it for yourself, not just being seen as a vessel for male pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Like communicating, feeling on your own feelings, which society at large hasn't really encouraged. You know, sexually empowered women are labeled as sluts instead of being like, wait, for me, yeah, I find sex like meditation. I get out of my head. It's a way that I drop into my feelings, and that can be so, so healing for women who aren't taught how to be empowered and feel good in themselves versus just submitting and potentially never orgasming from their partner because they didn't know that they can feel so good and have all these different types of orgasms because we grew up in this patriarchal culture.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was having trouble like coming and like I would talk to my mom about it, and my mom was like, she had the same experience, funnily enough. So I wonder if it has to do, maybe we're just like more complex in our biology. I don't know, but I think part of it was also we had a hard time letting go of feeling that we need to be like pleasing the guy, and like in order for you to come you have to be a little bit selfish, quote unquote. You have to forget about the other person for a second so you can actually come, right? And I think that for me it was like a process of being like, okay, forget about him. Actually, something that has helped me is thinking of that person watching me, and then I think, oh, that person is finding it really hot. So maybe it's not like the healthiest solution because it's still like from a male perspective, but like honestly that's kind of how I operate, and something that I've discovered, that because we live in this patriarchal society where we are shown a version of sex that's very male gaze centered. To be honest, like my own sexuality is like filtered to the male gaze, but in a way that has given me more independence because like it's filtered to the male gaze, but it's me who's like thinking about it, you know, and it's me the one who's like getting turned on by that,
right? And controlling that narrative. You are controlling that narrative versus feeling like you have to adhere to the society's narrative.
Well, but that might not even be a patriarchal socialization thing. That might just be that you feel hot knowing that someone else is turned on by you, and that like doubles your pleasure. Do you know what I mean?
Right, but I don't necessarily like think about like, oh, she's finding this so hot. Like yeah, that's why I don't date women separately, because I kind of like to think of what he's seeing, and that's like what turns me on.
Interesting.
When I figured that out, that also like helped me like with my own sexuality. So like there doesn't need to be a man there and I can be like on my own, but I'm still thinking like, this is how a guy would see it, you know, which is like, it's just what it is, you know. But yeah, it's a journey for sure. This is so interesting, but let's finish with the last question, which is, what would you tell to a polycurious person?
For me, it would be, I think, essentially keeping true to yourself and being honest with your insecurities, like open, radical communication about what your insecurities are. But also, if you're curious, making sure that you are spending a lot of time with yourself and loving yourself through the process, so that you're really like nurturing who you are as an individual versus just getting lost in potentially what your partner wants. So I think self-growth and self-love are just essential before navigating kind of like non-monogamy, so you don't abandon your own needs throughout the process.
Yeah, and jumping off the last thing that she said, so we don't actually consider ourselves polyamorous. We
Yeah,
consider ourselves
neither
just-
do I,
Yeah,
which is
yeah, just
so
non-monogamous.
surprising
Yeah.
to people because I have polycurious. Sounds like I'm totally polyamorous. I'm not. I
Yeah.
don't consider myself polyamorous.
But it's
so.
become, and we say it too, because
Yeah.
it's become a catch-all. I mean, you could say non-monogamy or whatever, but it's like the best thing about this entire like social movement that's happening right now is re-examining your relationship style as a whole. Monogamy is no longer the automatic default. You can cater to however you want to do it. You can find other people that would be into that type of relationship style. And maybe that changes. You know, maybe you do develop feelings for someone else and decide, oh shit, I'm poly. If you are curious about this, you can find some sort of relationship dynamics that work for you. That's
Yeah.
my advice.
And also, like, labels don't really matter, because even if you identify as polyamorous or non-monogamous, every relationship's going to have its own boundaries and parameters. So I think also, just like you were saying, going with what feels good for you and what your needs are, and not getting hung up on what type of relationship it is or what the label is. So it's just going with what you think is best and creating your own rules that work for you and your partner.
Yeah, relationship by design, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Love that. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having
having
us.
us.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I love Natasha and Jeremy. I think they're so great and they speak so eloquently about sex and pleasure and all of the topics we discussed today. So if you want to hear more from them, if you want to hear more from me, don't forget to join us for that Instagram live. That's this Sunday, May 7th. And all you have to do is go to our Instagram, Polycurious Podcast, where I will be posting all of the details. Okay, guys, thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you all on the next episode.